Everybody, welcome to members, officers, members of the press. Welcome to the Inshore Fisheries Conservation Authority meeting on Thursday, the 11th of January at 9:30. I'd just like to start off with apologies. I've got a list, Dale, the Harbour Master, Robert Francis, Kate Sugar's got tonsillitis, she can't make the meeting, and I've got one other, which is Nick Jenkins, who's on holiday. So that's apologies from them. I'd also, while at this moment in time, like to introduce you to Nicola Stenson, the new manager, taken over from Diana for strategic and development. So we'd like to welcome Nicola to the team. And hopefully you'll do a good job. I'm sure you will. So welcome. Right, so we'll start with number one, which is declarations of interest, please.
I think my light was on.
Lovely, thank you. Number two, minutes of the last meeting. Can we confirm they're a true record, please?
Before we do that, Chairman, can I point out a few errors?
You can, yeah.
On the first page, RAS is correctly spelled with an E on the end, and I've picked it up 4 times in one paragraph. That's entry 2417, page 1. And on the following page, fourth paragraph down on page 2, I didn't suggest that it should be a further husband of the new vessel, which included common trundle. I did say that we could go to him for advice on procurement and specification, because his experience in selecting the Cornwall survey boat as well. So it wasn't actually the ship's husband, it was his advice on procurement and specification.
Right. Are there any other comments on the notes? So with them noted, can we have a proposal they're a correct record? Seconder? Those in favour? Thank you very much for that. Urgent items, I do have a couple. Firstly, we did the interviews, we shortlisted, we spent the day doing the interviews, and we appointed a chap called Tom Hooper, who's very experienced. He came over yesterday, the day before, and he had an induction to the council, what the job was about, the islands, travel, the whole lot. And he rung up yesterday and confirmed that he would like to take the job. So as from the first week in February, we will be back on track with a chief officer, which is good news for the IFCA. Secondly, it's my apologies, because I should have put this in part one for a report from Tim, but Tim took my place at the association meeting, and there were some important issues brought up in London regarding different issues, and I'd like to hand you over to Tim to give you an update on what happened in London with the association.
Right. Yes, it was an interesting experience. Something that I was not totally used to, but the things that turned up that were interesting was the representative from DEFRA turned up and got questioned quite heavily about what was happening on things like, after Brexit, the 6 to 12 mile limit. Well, obviously they don't know. And they also got into a little bit of a debate as to who, if they did have a 6 to 12 mile limit, who'd be policing it, with what boats. And they obviously didn't know that either. But there was a comment from DEFRA in amongst that it is possible that if some agreement was made, they may have to allow up to certain areas inshore some of the foreign boats it's still in from Europe. What that means, that's as far as the information we could get. But so the second thing that came up there was that a marine white paper to cover some of the angles that has been covered by European legislation would be coming out for consultation. We were told by the end of December. However, it has not turned up yet. And they were the silly thing was that they were going to send a white paper around to all the IFCAs for consultation, but only give 3 weeks to actually consult, which is not overly a long time. However, it hasn't turned up, and I was a bit concerned that we may have missed it, so I rang Stephen Bolt last night and said, have I missed this? And he said, no, it seems to have been delayed and it's all gone quiet. So, no white paper as of moat, but something that does need watching out for. And the next thing that came up was that there was been a concern through all the IFCAs of how slow the bylaws were. And they seem to have ground to a halt because basically, according to DEFRA, because they're too busy sorting out firefighting regarding Brexit rather than getting on and doing things like bylaws. The lady from DEFRA did ask if we've got any bylaws, could she add a list, and she got inundated from all the IFCAs, including myself, to say where's ours, and in the end she sort of almost gave up because it would be too much to work through at that meeting, and said that as far as she knew that they were all in the offing and that none of the outstanding bylaws had problems, but she didn't explain why then they couldn't just sign them off. But there you go. So the bylaws don't appear to have a problem. That I think we've got 2 that are out there, and but they're stuck in the system with their legal department and going nowhere at the moment. They got talking about things like marine protected areas after Brexit, and I asked DEFRA what happens about places that have large areas of European marine site after Brexit. Do they know what's going to happen to it? And she said, how many have you got? And I said 1, but it covers about 80% of our area, which they seemed a little bit unaware of, which was slightly concerning. Anyway, they said that as far as they're aware, whatever the outcome of the Brexit talks, that EMSs should be turned into some form of marine protected areas. And obviously that flags up a little bit of something that we need to watch here, because if you were to just make all our marine conservation zones and European marine site one giant MPA, marine protected area, it's what happens to all the local agreements that have been made in good faith for those marine conservation zones. Would they still be, some of them I know would be, and others would be a little bit of a problem if you said now you have to apply that to the whole area. So it's something that we would have to keep an eye on and watch for. And obviously Tom, when he comes in place, would have to keep an eye on where that's going, because that could alter how our local agreements work. But apart from that, I brought that subject up, and there was a sort of slightly vague reply saying that we would have to build in some local autonomy, we suspect, but it was obviously in its infancy, so it was fairly vague there. The other thing that came up and I asked about was the inshore vessel monitoring scheme for small vessels, small open boats, because I commented that we have in the islands quite a few boats that are no more than glorified punts, that it's very hard to sort of put monitoring systems on and keep them working. And apparently they are trialling one system in Poole Harbour or around Poole area in open boats that might work. But they also considered this possibly of the very smallest boats, there could be an exemption for some of the DEFRA actually said there could be an exemption for some of the really small boats that have got fishing licenses. Anyway, that was as far as I've got with that, and as of the things that would interest us. Has anyone got any questions?
Did they give any idea of timescale with the production of the monitoring systems?
Yeah, they said that it would start in, they were going to start hopefully by the end of next year, but they're going to start in grading. They're going to start with the larger vessels first and then move down the sizes and then decide what to do with these really tiny boats after that.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The white paper, which is the biggest area of concern, I think, is it I don't know what it's about, but is it amendments or additions to the Marine Conservation, sort of Marine Coastal Access Act?
I understood that it was going to replace European legislation regarding marine areas.
Doug?
Yeah, sorry, Tim. Also, just going back to the IVMS, I think originally DEFRA spoke about there might be some funding for the fishermen, like through EMFF. Is that still the case? Did they mention anything about that?
Yes, there's one of the IFCAs is holding a wad of money that the government gave them, and I can't remember which one, but one of them is Southeast or something, is holding a wad of money to fund it for the fishermen. And then after that, because it's going to be done through the 4G networking system, they're kind of 4G phones that the fishermen would have to pay a fee every year to keep them running. So that wouldn't be part of the agreement. So the cost of the fishermen could be sort of between £100 to £150. And I did point out that some of these people, again, in very, very small boats that are almost part-time, that amount of money is a fairly big deal to some people. So.
Well, I'd like to thank you once again for attending the association meeting, and I hope it was a good experience for you. Hopefully you better go on a few more. Right, we're moving to part one, reports requiring a decision. I will apologise that is a very short agenda, but the reason that I went ahead with this meeting was purely we have to set fees and charges. So that is the reason why we're here, to set fees and charges. And obviously you also had an update that we are now going to be fully operational with a new chief officer, which I thought, for the public record, we need to carry on with this meeting. So what we'll do is I'll hand you over to Doug on fees and charges, if he's got anything to say on it.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that, Mr. Chairman. Okay, this is obviously pretty straightforward. So we have our standard fees and charges that we set a couple of years ago, and then all we've done each financial year is add the CPI increase to it. So it hasn't changed from a couple of years ago except for actual fee amount. So it's pretty straightforward. If you've got any questions about any of the fees or any of the charges relating to any of it.
Well, the only thing that I would like to say is, obviously we're going to hopefully pass this today. When Tom takes over, if he's got any adjustments he feels that he might want to address at a later date, we could bring it to another meeting to change them if he feels fit. I do think with a new chief officer he should be able to...
Yeah, completely. So these were originally set back when Steve and I were working together, and then it's just sort of carried through suit. But obviously the new chief officer, it's up to his discretion what he'd like to do. Because
I do think at a later date we could probably go back to it and reassess some of the prices for maybe better rates on certain parts of it. Yeah, originally when Steve and I sat down and wrote them, we sort of took a lot of modelling off like Cornwall IFCAs, other IFCAs, to sort of get what they're pricing themselves as, and sort of mirrored that a bit, and use that as an example. So that's where we originally got those figures from, but yeah, like you say, we can go back and revise that if need be, or if the new chief wants that. So are members happy to approve that with the increase on the rate? Yeah? Opposed? Seconded? Those in favour? Thank you very much, unanimous. That's brilliant. Right, Natural England update. Hopefully you've all read the report. Kate emailed me last night and apologised, she's got tonsillitis. But because she's dedicated to the Natural England, and she is obviously an ambassador for them, I believe that, she still would like to come over sometime in January, the date hasn't been confirmed yet, and do a little workshop, obviously regarding the SPA. I think this would be a good opportunity for members to meet her and ask the questions. But if there are any specific questions on Kate's report today, we can note them so that Kate can have some answers. So are there any questions on the SPA that members would like me to ask her before the workshop?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On page 2 of the proposal sheet, I'm not sure if everyone's seen this, but this is the proposal sheet. You can get it online.
Yes, yeah.
From Natural England. It states that a map showing the possible marine extension can be found on page 4, which is there, that one on the map. I was going to ask Kate if she's been here, is this an arbitrary boundary or was it done in consultation with local fishermen and local boat users such as Inshore and Wesleyan? Because it seems to me it looks as if it's just vaguely drawn out of a hat. I don't know, but I think I know it's under consultation. We've got another 2 weeks or so to talk about it, but I feel that consultation with local fishermen and Inshore and launch users is essential before that boundary is actually fixed in stone.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, and I think we could bring that up at the workshop and maybe have a meeting, an informal meeting with stakeholders in February, March, which I think would be a way forward. Tim?
I said this recently to Kate, that what the problem is not just having the area defined. It was the same as MCZs. When we did MCZs, people were saying, what does the area mean? Nothing. It don't mean it. What is important is making sure that there's consultation put forward in the future for the management measures, because it's the management measures that will affect people that operate out there rather than the actual area. Although I would have thought that would have gone to the European Marine Site boundaries, but obviously not.
Perhaps I can add a bit to that as well. I mean, when this was considered a few years ago with the RSPB representative in Scilly, Dr. Vic,
Heaney.
yeah, I'm sure that the extent of the eastern side of it was out here somewhere, because most of the breeding areas or foraging or whatever areas were here, way to the east off the East and so on further. But this one seems to cut it off just half a mile from Lindley's Head. So again, a query about how that boundary will be defined.
Yeah, I think they're all valid points. I think what we'll do, it'll be essential to have a workshop with Kate in January, and we'll move forward from there. I don't think there's anything else we can really discuss now, because she's not here to answer the questions. So if members are happy just to note that, and we'll move on. Yeah? Good. Thank you. So agenda item 6 is the Marine Management Organisation. The report's there. I'd like to hand you over to David.
Just once we've got the new land and obligation come through, which I think the votes in the southwest. Votes in the southwest will mainly involve whiting for the first time. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to have a huge impact on fishermen. We've just had the December Council meeting, which the results should be published fairly soon. We've set out a new way of communicating with the industry, where we're trying to move towards the email and text. That's every fisherman has been written to for their details to try and cut down on paper communication. So that's already been enacted. Should save a lot of money. The prohibition, I can't remember if this was I mentioned this last time, or prohibition on buried lobsters has been brought into force. Have we met since then? Yeah, so this is a tricky one. It is there, and it's basically no buried lobsters can be landed at all in any British ports. That's it. The statement of support. I'll continue to support for the UK.
Thank you for your report. Are there any questions for David? Doug?
Sorry, David, yeah, just a bit of clarification just for everyone, because there has been a bit of confusion about the buried SI that's gone through on lobsters and crawfish, because it's quite commercially driven. It's still, the ban still is held up for both recreational and commercial?
That is my understanding.
Yeah, some people sort of came to me and said, like, oh, it's only for commercial and not recreational. But my understanding was it's for both, but I just want to...
It is my understanding as well. I will double check that, and if that isn't the case, I will get back in touch.
Ideal.
That's a valid point, because there was an emergency bylaw at the end of October association meeting put in, I think, with Devon and Severn, to introduce it to hobby fishermen, because it wasn't covered in the Act. It was for commercial fishermen only. So they had to bring in an emergency bylaw, from what I'm aware. So we haven't got any sort of emergency bylaw. So clarification there would be worth looking into, I think.
Okay, I can...
All right, thanks. Are there any other questions? Right, well, once again, I'll apologise for the short agenda. We've set the fees and charges with a caveat on it. And thank you all for attending, and I'll close the meeting at 9:52. Thank you very much.